That's the current website of the AWMF. You get a link to a PDF, and as you can see on the top of the site, it's quite big documents. Why is that a problem? Those documents are, as said, like very large. Their structures are not very consistent. It is very difficult to integrate them into digital health systems, and without any processing, you cannot use them directly for any clinical decision support or quality monitoring. And the AWMF guideline registry is currently hosting about 800 of those guidelines, and our project is aiming to make their guidelines fair, so improve their findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. The DissolveE project is standing for digitalization of the AWMF guideline registry for an open, guideline-based, and trustworthy evidence ecosystem. It is led by the Association of the Scientific Medical Societies in Germany with different academic and industry partners and founded by the Committee of the Federal Joint Committee. Our overarching goal is to digitize the guideline registry to make it interoperable and machine readable, and we hope to improve the usability and use of clinical guidelines. For that, we develop a FHIR-based structure guideline format. And in the beginning of the project, we collected some requirements to be translated into FHIR. We organized some interviews, developed a survey, had some focus groups and workshops, and the stakeholders involved were guideline developers, downstream implementers, but also registry maintainers, registry users, and guideline users as a point of care. In the end, we had a prioritized set of infrastructure needs, and those requirements needed to be translated into FHIR. We formed a little multidisciplinary team. Gregor is a developer and medical informatics specialist, a colleague and myself, both medical doctors with additional experience in medical informatics, and last but not least, Ina as a guideline development expert. We hold meetings in a bi-weekly rhythm, on-site and online, prioritize the requirements further, and for each requirement we evaluated different modeling options and also discussed them and documented the decisions. And for the talk today, we selected some requirements, and I hand over to Gregor.
Thank you very much. So, as you can imagine, we had a lot of requirements that we needed to represent or fulfill in FHIR. We'll present only 4 of them today, and I'll go through them quickly and then in more details. The first one was that we needed to build on existing standards, and obviously we're using FHIR here, and we're building on the EBM, the Evidence-Based Medicine Implementation Guide. Second, we need multilingual support, so we need to model or represent different languages side by side. Then we need to support multiple levels of guideline representation from PDFs, as they are now in the AWF registry, to fully or potentially fully executable content. And we need to link the evidence on which the evidence-based recommendations were based on. We'll need to link that and represent that as well. So for the first requirement, we had long discussions whether we should go with FHIR R5 or R6, and eventually decided to go with R6 for a couple of reasons. The main reasons were that, so first, the EBMIG, the Evidence-Based Medicine Implementation Guide on which we are building, runs on R6 already. Also, some main resources that we need, such as group and evidence variable, change significantly from R5 to R6. As well as others. So, as we are still also developing this IG, we thought it would be the best approach to go with where the standard is going. So, as I said, we're building on the EBMIG, and specifically our main resource for both the guideline representation and recommendation representation is the composition resource. The EBMIG has 2 profiles, so for guideline and for recommendation, and we are inheriting from these within our own IG, and have some more sub profiles that model specifics of the different guideline classes in Germany. For the multilingual content. So we must support parallel content in multiple languages, and so we won't probably, or will probably never have a full guideline in different languages. And obviously our main language is German, but we have, or there will be, or is some content, for example, individual recommendations or patient information that may be available in additional languages, and we need to include this information. As I said, we're using the composition resource, and the sections in the composition resource have the text field, which has a data type narrative. And there, the FHIR standard tells us to use the XML-lang attribute for multilingual content. But the problem, also with respect to the requirements from our requirement analysis, was that we aren't able to include the author metadata, so we could not say who authored the different languages. So eventually, we decided to go with this approach. We're using, or we have the actual the actual text content now in leaf nodes of sections with a slice named language, where we have an extension, a language extension that gives us the language code. And then we have, so in this example with the introduction, then for technical reasons, a default slice. And then the three different languages here, English, German, English, and Arabic, side by side. Also, here we are able to use right to left text direction. So major requirement is that we need to support different levels of representation. So could you tell me the time?
You have 12 minutes.
Oh yeah, perfect. Different levels. So this is the Boxwala model of knowledge representation, going from narrative content to over semi-structured, structured, and executable content. And in our case, that means on the narrative side, we have with the current state, which are the PDF-based guidelines, with some metadata around that. Next step is then have the text actually structured, so having these compositions and sections used to structure the actual content. As a next level, we have coded content, so the population and intervention, so the patient group that is addressed by recommendation and the action that should be performed to these patients, tagged basically using concepts from terminologies. Then as some kind of intermediate step here, model-based logic, so still this coded content with concepts from terminologies, but connected through some logical operators, so for example, and or not. And lastly, fully executable logic using CQL. So in our case, so we need to model all these, or be able to represent all these levels, and how we are doing this. Again, so we're using composition for the recommendation and guideline. This is no guideline here, the composition for guideline. You see this is for the current content of the guideline registry, where we really have PDF documents. We have we are using a section called attachments, where we then basically link to the PDF documents via document reference resources. For the semi-structured version, this is more or less what we've seen with the language already. So we're using sections with a different content here. We have some sections predefined, like introduction. We can use custom sections for any content that should be represented. And then anywhere we can reference then to actual recommendations. So again, this is a guideline profile. And then here we are referencing a recommendation profile of composition. Then for the structured content, we are using we are now in the recommendation composition profile. Then we have this language section, and here we have an extension, a keyword extension, where we can add codable concepts to the population, or to go one step further, we can reference either evidence variable or group. So evidence variable would be R5, group is R6. To define these the coded population or intervention together with the logical combination of these. So in this example here, artificially ventilated patients with ARDS. And lastly, so this is rather an outlook, because this is not the current focus. But when we're going for executable content, obviously we intend to comply with the clinical practice guidelines, IG, and use CQL. Then for the fourth requirement, the goal here is to represent the entire evidence chain. That means going from the research question, the PICO, population intervention comparison outcome, to the evidence, single studies or so, certainty, then the justification and the final recommendation. Again, we're building on profiles from the EBM-IG, but also our own profiles, of artifact assessment in this case. And specifically what this looks like, we have here our recommendation as a composition profile. And we first have a profile of artifact assessment, recommendation justification, which contains in the content slices for things like strengths of recommendation, direction of recommendation, and so on. And then we have these evidence slices. And we use evidence slices. We use one per outcome because obviously the evidence for one outcome, for example, mortality, could be different compared to another outcome, such as quality of life or so. So we're using one evidence slice here per outcome, and then we have here in the evidence the overall evidence, so the judgment of the overall evidence, and then as components the individual evidences, so individual studies, for example. And linking here means that we have a target reference to another profile of artifact assessment, certainty of evidence rating, which in its base form only contains rating system and level of evidence. And we've modeled a couple of rating systems such as grade, which then contain these other, the specific ratings of that rating system. And this artifact assessment then has or references as its artifact, which is assessed the actual evidence. We're using the evidence resource, which can link or cite the actual studies and contain also statistics in the computable form and so on. All right. As for the current state and future steps, we presented this first IG draft within our consortium, collected feedback, and are currently refining it. We will test the IG through semi-automatic translation of test batches. That means that this is the current content of the guideline registry. Then we will align the terminology that we're using in our IG, that we're currently using in our IG, to existing terminologies. And it's planned that we have an initial release with which the new guideline registry will be built in September this year. It will be hosted under this domain, FHIR.awf.org. Currently it's private because we're still developing it, but you can already bookmark it and look from time to time, if it's already public.
And last but not least, some lessons learned. We think that all levels of guideline representation matter, so from PDFs to fully executable. Our model is supporting the full spectrum. And maybe to emphasize also something important, you need to have a clear idea like what people think, what is a computable guideline from the beginning on. For some people, a computable guideline or a PDF is already computable. For others, CQL would be like the way to go. And as said, like involve all stakeholders from the beginning on, guideline authors, guideline users, informaticians, standards bodies, etc. Because we don't want to make like a theoretical project, but having it really in practical use. And with that, we would like to thank you for your attention. We would also like to thank our close colleagues and the entire consortium. And if you have any questions, reach out to either like our main address or also like privately on our emails.
All right. Thank you very much. Are there any questions in the room? You guys are doing a Q&A, right?
Yes.
Before I say something completely out of... Okay.
Thanks. One question regarding the slices on the sections for the languages with the extension for the language. Did you also consider just creating your own extension? There is some translation extension in FHIR, but not for XHTML, to recreate it, to also use just it on the XHTML part and not the whole to not repeat the whole section. Or do you also have like translation in the display values of your codings, and therefore you need that was the motivation then?
So one of the motivation, I think, like as you said, like coding systems in different languages, different displays, but also like different authors, depending on the language you have.
Yeah.
So I think this was like even like the main reason why we went with this option.
So this was another point that we discussed really maybe hours even. But the main point was the modeling of or representation of different authors. And yeah, I mean, we could have created another extension and added also an author field to that or so. But eventually we decided that this might be with our requirements.
It's
the
a
best
better
way.
solution, I agree, yeah. And the second question, sorry, for the R6 part. You are based on EBM, which is also R6, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Have you thought about backporting? So because most of the things in Germany still on R4, maybe this is not a problem because this is very specific niche,
Right.
and you don't have like direct interaction with other resources.
Right. That's exactly the point here.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?
And it does, just in terms of versioning, right? Like it seems like R6 is going to actually be really published by HL7 It's going to be actually published by HL7 sometime next year. Is that something that you guys anticipate, like in a German setting, will kind of be more available or more widely used? Other folks will kind of quickly follow your lead in adoption and usage of R6?
I mean,
I know that's a little bit off topic.
Of course, we hope so. But as Patrick already said, so we are not interacting directly with any patient data. So this is really the repository of the guidelines, and we are not so much connected to the, for example, EHR system. So that doesn't influence each other so much. But of course, would be very good for us if R6 would be released or final or stable by next year. Because end of next year, we intend to have the stable version of our IG. So the initial version should be published this year, then develop the registry with that, and then end of next year, the stable version. Obviously, it would be good then to have a stable released R6 version by then.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I have two questions. The one is, you now have the guidelines translation into other languages, but they are still on the same level of interoperability. And did you also talk to the guideline authors how they feel about going more technical to come up the level ladder into executable guidelines?
So this is a very good question. So yeah, we have like different versions of guidelines, might be like different patient versions, different long versions, etc., different languages. In the best case, they are like structured the same way. In most of the cases, it's not the case. So this is like one of the first maybe like barriers. The second one is that we try with our requirements also like to talk like to guideline developers and the guideline maintaining organizations and so on to get a better structuring from the beginning on. So with the format that we develop, we try also to have a kind of template, like how it should look like. And for the second part of your question with like more computable, etc., there are already initiatives. I mean, like the Magic app, etc., also already tries to somehow structure like the PICOs. It's not fully defined as we would like to, but at least it's a step in this direction. But it's very time consuming and also time and resource consuming. You need like people who are trained, who are experienced also like in semantic interoperability to translate those concepts. And I mean that's not all focused like in a first or like in an initial step, but we hope that with our format we will go like in this direction.
All right, thank you very much. If there are any more questions, I suggest... I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't cut it short right here. So I would suggest either putting them in the Q&A thread on Whova or probably approaching one
Yeah,
of you.
that
Yes,
would work as
okay.
well. Yeah.
But unfortunately, I have to stop the questions here because it is we are a bit over time.
Thank you.